Hi guys, welcome to my world history class. Get that up there. The first unit that we're going to talk about is the Enlightenment and the American Revolution. But what I want to do first, what I want to do first is I want to get you guys in a mind frame where you understand what's going on in the world at this time, what has been happening, and get you set to where you can really understand the Enlightenment. So I'm going to go back in time a bit. Let's draw a timeline. It's not exactly straight. Sorry, I'm not the best at that. So here we are, 4.5 billion years ago. This is the beginning of Earth. I can't. Here's the beginning of Earth. Then, somewhere around here, humans came along. And then about 10,000 years ago, so if this is 0, and we are in about the year 2000, then about -8,000, which is 8,000 BCE, this is when agriculture began. People began farming and growing things and making settlements and staying in one place. Well, quite a long time after that, I'm not giving exact years because this is just a basic lesson. About 500 BCE became Rome. It's really, really important. You need to know about Rome. There was the Roman Empire, there was the Roman Republic. We're just going with basic, let's say the Roman Empire. That lasted 1,000 years. From, if we were talking about math, it lasted from -500 to about +500. So I'm going to stop for a second here. Somewhere around in here, Rome became so huge that it couldn't be controlled by just one person anymore. So I made this little map. Here we are. I think you guys are still looking at this. All of this is the Roman Empire. They broke it up. They broke up the west side and the east side. And the west side became known as the Western Roman Empire. And the east was the Eastern Roman Empire. It was all one empire. It's important to know that it was still one Rome. It was just so big that one person couldn't rule the whole thing. So they said, okay, Rome, which is right about here, Rome, you're going to be in charge of the West, and Constantinople, you're going to be in charge of the East. But we're all one empire. But then, in about the year 350, around there, foreigners from around here started attacking the West, and attacking and attacking and attacking. And eventually, in 476, the Western Roman Empire fell. It was gone. There's no more Western Roman Empire. But the Eastern Roman Empire continued to be very, very strong. The Eastern Roman Empire is also called the Byzantine Empire. I want to stop for a second. Look at me. If you can learn that the Eastern Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire are the exact same thing, they're just different names for the exact same thing, you will be miles ahead of your classmates when you get to university. People get really, really confused about that. They think that the Eastern Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire were different things, and it confuses them and they fail tests. Don't let that happen to you. They're the exact same thing. So there was one Roman Empire. It got really, really, really big, too big for one person to control. And they broke it up. And they said, they didn't really break it up. They just, because it was one empire, they just said, okay, Rome, you're going to be in charge of the West. Constantinople, you're going to be in charge of the East. And then the Western Empire fell, collapsed. There is no more Western Roman Empire. But the East stayed really, really strong. And then they started calling themselves the Byzantine Empire, or really, I misspoke. That's not really true. They called themselves Romans. It's historians later that started calling it the Byzantine Empire. Now let's see if I can get back to my whiteboard. Yes, okay. So 500, we're back in the West now. Western Roman Empire fell, it collapsed. They went from being fancy, fancy, hoity-toity life where like people had spas and they went to public baths and they had restaurants and they had slaves that fed them grapes and fanned them with leaves, to nothing, abject poverty like that. Their empire collapsed. Their schools were burned down. Their libraries were burned down. Everybody lost all their money. Everything collapsed. That is when, right here, is when the Dark Ages began. It's called the Dark Ages because back here, everything had been pretty cool. Life had been good. People were educated and life was good. And then there was this big collapse and there's no more school, there's no more education, there's no more nothing. So they called it the Dark Ages. Dark Ages are the same as the Middle Ages. You'll hear these terms used back and forth. Some people say the Dark Ages, some people say the Middle Ages. When I'm talking to you, I go kind of back and forth. Sometimes I say one, sometimes I say the other. Just know I'm talking about the same age. The Dark Ages lasted 1,500 years from, oh no, I'm sorry, lasted 1,000 years, from 500 to 1,500. This was 1,000 years of people basically in what used to be the Western Roman Empire. Used to be very, very developed, used to be just life was really sweet. It completely collapsed. You've got now 1,000 years of people that basically didn't know anything. Society was beginning all over again from nothing. They were very, very, very superstitious during this time. Everybody thought that everything had to do with God. And if you got a disease, it was because you weren't a good enough person. If you did something really, if something really good happened to you, it was because you were a good person. So in about 1,500 began, oops, I'm trying to write, the Age of Reason. This is when people started noticing science. Once again, I need to repeat that back here, way back here in this time, even back here, there were scientists back here. But then everything collapsed and they forgot everything they knew. Schools were destroyed, libraries were destroyed, scientists were killed. They had to start all over. And it took them 1,000 years. And then people suddenly started noticing things like, if I throw this pencil up in the air, it's always going to fall. Always. Before, during the Dark Ages, if someone asked, if I throw this pen up in the air, why does it fall? Their answer was because God wants it to. But when people started using reasoning and scientific thought, why, when I throw this pen up in the air, does it land? They started coming up with scientific reasons about why that happened. And people started realizing that there's science behind the natural world. And that was called natural law. Natural law. People started realizing that there is a reason why things happen, and that's not necessarily supernatural. There's a scientific reason to it. Then, about 1,500 years after that, I'm just going to write down here, in the year 1700, people started thinking, if there are laws that apply to nature, like if the reason that I throw my pen up in the air every time it falls is gravity, and I can prove that with science, then maybe society itself has natural laws. The actual workings of culture in society. Maybe there are set rules to that. Maybe there are laws that dictate how society works. And that was about the year 1700. And that's where we are going to begin learning world history this year, is the year 1700, and when these scientists or scientists, thinkers, philosophers, people that think started coming up with studying the rules of society, studying the rules of culture, and are there set laws, natural laws for how society should work? That's where we're going to begin.